The stars dimmed. Across 50 systems, sensor nets flared red, screaming warnings in every known language as a spatial displacement, too massive to be natural, ruptured the fabric of subspace. The void trembled, stretched, and then tore wide open, as something ancient and impossibly vast ripped through reality itself, hurtling straight for the heart of the Thalzer dominion. For one fleeting instant, every sensor, every psionic channel, and every terrified mind felt it, an intelligence colder than space, older than any of them had dared imagine. The object dropped into real space with a soundless detonation of gravity. Waves, its silhouette eclipsed a moon, a shape of impossible geometry, all black alloy and jagged edges. It moved with grim, inexorable purpose toward the nearest planet. Even the war-hardened Thalzer fleet captains hesitated before ordering scans. Their neural conduits pulsed with unspoken dread. Somewhere in the darkness, an old story surfaced. From the Thalzer hive memory, an echo from an era they had chosen to forget. A tale of the humans of Sol, creatures so relentless that even the insectoid Thalzer had avoided their spiral of influence during the last expansion. But stories were stories. And Earth, they all agreed, was long dead. 200 years ago, the humans had vanished into their own civil war, the so-called Void Wars. Their final transmissions were fragmented cries of defiance and agony. No ships ever returned. The Terran Confederacy was presumed extinct, buried by the very weapons it had unleashed. Since then, the galaxy had reshaped itself without them. The Thalzer rose to supremacy, harvesting worlds to feed their hive mind. Dozens of civilizations fell in their path. Their telepathic lords demanded only submission, and most races surrendered before the first bombardments began. This time would be no different, they assured themselves. The Thalzer fleet, 100 warships and 3 planet crackers, advanced into the system called Kyoto Prime, a human-aligned colony that had once held nearly 1 billion inhabitants. Their scouts fanned out, drifting through eerie silence. Cities sprawled across the continents, immaculate and undamaged, their gleaming towers intact as if the people inside had simply vanished in mid-breath. Crops still grew in the hydroterraces. Power grids pulsed with residual energy. Automated lights blinked across empty streets, giving the impression that any moment, someone might step from a doorway to wave hello, but no one did. The Thalzer commander, Sirac Mind of Hunger, watched through the main viewport of his flagship, displeased by the lack of challenge. His psionic cilia twitched, sampling the stale residue of human presence. It was faint, old, and wrong somehow. He dispatched infiltration teams, each guarded by shock troopers with spined exosuits and plasma throwers. They spread through the abandoned cities like a plague of steel locusts, searching for anything of value: technology, genetic samples, archival records. The reports were the same in every city. No bodies, no weapons left behind, no defensive damage at all. It was as if the humans had calmly walked into the sky and never returned. A few of the scouts began to complain of headaches, dull throbbing behind their ocular nodes. Thalzer physiology was resilient to psychic contamination, but not immune. One after another, their voices crackled with interference over the command channel. Sirac felt the first flicker of unease. He tightened his mind link with the fleet, reinforcing discipline. There were always rumors about human psychic traps, but nothing documented. Nothing real. He ordered the networked archives aboard his flagship to run a deeper scan for any hidden transmissions. He expected nothing but background radiation, perhaps an automated distress call. Instead, the scanners returned a repeating signal, faint and ancient, using a modulation no current Thalzer cipher recognized. Sirac commanded the linguistic subroutines to isolate it. After several minutes, the signal was partially decoded. It contained only one word, cycling every 60 seconds, spoken in the blunt tonal cadence of a machine. Awakened. No coordinates, no signature, no attached data. Just that single word, over and over, saturating the planetary frequencies. His cilia quivered. Sirak had devoured the memories of 100 conquered commanders, but he could not remember ever feeling quite this specific shade of disquiet. Not an underling dared to interrupt his thoughts. "Lord Sirak," the lesser mind croaked, "shall we transmit an alert to the high synapse? Request reinforcement?" He nearly struck the speaker down for the suggestion. The Thalzer did not request aid. They took what they needed. They claimed worlds by right of superiority. Yet in the silence that followed, Sirak felt a creeping certainty that the absence here was not a sign of weakness. It was the hush before a blade fell. His gaze turned once more to the vast silhouette. Orbiting Kyoto Prime, the object whose arrival had darkened the stars. He magnified the image. Its hull was etched with patterns that no Thalza database could match. But in the center of that monstrous shape, a single emblem had survived time's erosion, a human hand, rendered in white metal, clenched around. A broken sword. The old stories whispered through the back of his mind. "Do not provoke Earth." He shook off the superstition. Stories were for the weak. He would tear the truth from this derelict relic soon enough. But far below, in the dark heart of the city, something ancient was watching him back. A slow shudder ran through the Thalzar, fleet as the last echoes of the human transmission faded into static. For several seconds no one spoke, no commands were issued. Even the disciplined synaptic relays of the hive mind went silent, each node straining to interpret the single word that had fractured their certainty. Awakened, the scouting teams continued their meticulous sweep across Kyoto Prime, but now their posture had shifted. They advanced in tight phalanxes instead of casual search patterns. Every doorway was treated as a possible ambush point. Every console, every powered device was a potential weapon, yet nothing happened. Sirak, mind of hunger, watched through the viewport as his ships adjusted orbit, aligning heavy batteries toward the planet's surface. His secondary brains whispered caution, that perhaps this was all an elaborate lure, a demonstration of the same ruthless cunning the humans had once been known for. But the main thread of his consciousness spat contempt at that idea. Humanity was extinct. Still, as minutes stretched into hours, the sense of wrongness only grew. It began with the anomalies. A team of engineers broke open a sealed transit hub, expecting dust and decay. Instead, they found fresh footprints leading into the tunnels. Perfectly preserved footprints, only hours old. But the air inside the hub was stale, the emergency life support long since depleted. No living being could have left those tracks. Another team discovered a vault labeled in Terran script. Even their best fusion torches could not breach the alloy doors. The surface shimmered with an energy signature they had never encountered, a reactive field that absorbed scans like a sponge. Sirak dispatched his most trusted psyker, Krizel, Singer of Bones, to interrogate the vault's memory. Krizel extended his cilia into the psychic lattice, probing for impressions of the humans who had built it. For a moment, he found only echoes, the mundane residue of fear and hurry. Then, like a blade behind a curtain, something struck back. A pulse of mental static so sharp it carved across the psychic channel. Krizel collapsed, his cilia writhing in agony. Two medics rushed to his side, but Sirak could already sense the damage. Krizel's mind was splintered. Not merely injured, wounded in a way that no Thalzer had ever suffered. His thoughts unspooled in gibbering spirals, repeating one phrase in a human tongue he should never have known. "Remember us." Sirak cut the channel before the contamination could spread. For the first time in his long existence, he felt the cold prickling of real fear. Reports continued to drift in, each more unsettling than the last. Automated defenses powered themselves up without visible energy sources. Holographic projectors replayed scenes from Earth's last war, soldiers in black armor, faceless behind their visors, advancing into fire with no hesitation. Some of the lesser minds began to speculate that perhaps the planet itself retained some fragment of will, a primitive superstition. But none dared voice outright doubt of the Thalzer right to conquest. Not yet. Sirak summoned his fleet captains to a private synaptic council. A translucent sphere of shared consciousness shimmered between them as they linked minds, their thoughts overlaying one another. "The humans are extinct," one captain projected, with an edge of desperation. "These are nothing but programmed illusions, psychological warfare meant to confuse us." "Perhaps," Sirak allowed, "but illusions alone cannot cripple a master psyker. And there are fresh footprints where no life can exist." "Residual automata," suggested another. "Or perhaps sleeper constructs. The humans were fond of their toys." "Then why have we not encountered any resistance? Why display the relic in orbit, yet strike nowhere?" Silence rippled across the sphere. Sirak felt them all grappling with the same unspoken possibility, that the humans were not extinct, that this was not a graveyard, but a snare waiting for the right moment to spring. When the Synaptic Council dissolved, Sirak returned to the observation platform. He studied the silhouette in orbit again, magnifying it until the hull markings were clear. Under the white hand gripping the sword, he spotted an alphanumeric code, ES Nemesis. He searched the archives for any mention of such a ship, but no record surfaced. If this vessel had existed, it had been purged from Thalzer memory. Below, the infiltration teams grew more tense. One by one, they began to report equipment failures, power packs drained to zero, weapons refusing to cycle, suit telemetry going dark. A squad trying to force open another vault found the metal warm to the touch, as though the ship itself were a live dot at last. A junior officer approached the command dais, cilia trembling. "Lord Sirak, we have detected a power surge inside the derelict. What magnitude? Unknown. But the energy signature exceeds our dreadnought's entire output." "It is," the officer hesitated. "It is growing." A silence fell over the entire bridge. Sirak knew that the next step, the logical step, was retreat. But to withdraw without claiming victory would be to fracture the Thalzar's illusion of invincibility. He could not allow that dot, and yet, in the pit of his mind, he felt the certainty take root. This was not the moment to assert dominance. This was the moment the Thalzer would learn how little they understood about their prey. He leaned forward, staring into the infinite darkness beyond the VIEWP dot in the silence. Something deep in the derelict began to stir, a shifting of colossal mass. Like a leviathan rolling over in its sleep, Sirak pressed a clawed digit against the viewport glass and whispered a single, disbelieving thought. "They were waiting for us." The derelict stirred again. This time, the movement was no subtle vibration or flicker of phantom energy. The entire hull flexed along impossible seams, plates the size of city blocks sliding apart, revealing a black chasm that burned with sullen red light. It was as though the ship were yawning awake after a long patient sleep. On the Thalzar flagship's bridge, no one spoke. Even the lesser minds forgot to breathe. Through the magnified viewport, they could see the cavern's interior, thousands of hexagonal cells arrayed in concentric rings, each glowing with its own pulsing signature. SZIR, a K-mind of hunger, felt the urge to look away, but forced himself to watch. In that moment, he understood this was no derelict. It was a vault, a weapon, a relic of Earth's last war, sealed away in orbit around Kyoto Prime until the day it would be needed again. He opened a command channel to every Thalzar ship. "Raise shields, arm all batteries, prepare for hostile action." "Yes, Lord Sirak," chorused a dozen voices. Somewhere deep in the Nemesis, something vast and mechanical shrieked to life. A ripple of gravity swept across the fleet, rattling hulls and disrupting sensors. The Thalzer dreadnoughts shivered under the strain. Their AI auxiliaries howled warnings in 100 dialects. A chorus of dread filled the command channel. It's powering weapons. Emissions are off the scale. Sirac's cilia spread in agitation. Fire on it, he ordered. Now. The fleet obeyed. Blue lances of fusion energy screamed across the void, converging on the Nemesis's exposed cavity. Bombardment cannons spat shells the size of transports, their warheads designed to fracture continental crusts. Dozens of hits landed. In rapid succession, the explosion should have shredded the ancient vessel, should have cracked its armor to slag. Instead, the impacts vanished. The hull shimmered with ripples of faint white distortion. Each shot simply disappeared, as though it had been swallowed by a vast, invisible ocean. The fleet captains shouted in panic. Confirmed. No damage. We cannot penetrate its defenses. This is impossible. Sirac felt his focus splintering. Only the iron discipline of his centuries held him together. He gestured sharply to silence the cacophony. Continue bombardment, he ordered. Though he already knew it was futile. Scan for vulnerabilities. The Thalzer ships fired again. Fusion beams struck in staggered salvos. Torpedoes detonated in overlapping shockwaves. But the Nemesis remained unchanged. The rift in its hull continued to widen. Something moved inside. At first, it was no more than a shape. A dark silhouette emerging from the cavern, backlit by smoldering crimson light. As it drifted clear of the Nemesis's superstructure, Sirac finally understood what he was seeing. A war machine, roughly spherical, perhaps 3 kilometers across. Plates of black adaptive armor layered over dense core reactors. Its surface bristled with weapon ports, hundreds of them, each now irising open. The Thalzer had faced countless enemies, the crystalline fleets of the Voronax, the Nanit, swarms of the Karthus brood. They had never encountered anything quite like this. Data streamed across. Sirac's neural link, weapon scans, energy signatures, trajectories. His analysts struggled to classify it. At last, one designation rose. To the top of the tactical feed, Omnidirectional Weapons Platform. ESS Nemesis Auxiliary Combat Corps. The ship hadn't just survived the Void Wars. It had evolved. Lord Sirac, came a tremulous voice. The platform is acquiring targeting solutions. He felt a moment of pure, helpless rage. Evasive maneuvers. All ships disperse. Engines flared as the Thalzer armada scattered, abandoning their formations. Too late. The combat corps' weapon ports flared white. Lances of coherent energy stabbed outward in every direction. One dreadnought vanished in a silent burst of superheated gas, its shields offering no resistance. Another ship's hull imploded. Under a sudden gravitational spike, crushed to a fragment of its size, Sirac's flagship shuddered under a near miss, armor plates buckling. Warning klaxons screamed in his skull. He forced his thoughts into the command net. Counterfire. Target. Those emitters. But the core moved with impossible agility, rotating smoothly in space, unleashing fresh salvos with each turn. The Thalzer fleet, once a perfect instrument of terror, became a field of burning wreckage in minutes. Through it all, Sirac could not look away from the Nemesis itself. As the combat corps slaughtered his ships, the great vault ship began to close again. Its cavernous rift sealed, layer by layer, until only the hull remained. Pristine. Indifferent. It had not needed to reveal its true power. It had merely deployed a single auxiliary platform. A final burst reached. Sirac's flagship, a tight-beam human transmission in archaic Sol standard. We warned you. This is Earth's grave. Leave now. Sirac felt the last of his certainty dissolve. The Thalzer were not the apex predators they had believed themselves to be. They had awakened something older and far more dangerous. He looked upon the field of burning wreckage and knew the truth. They had made a grave mistake. Wreckage drifted like shattered moons around Kyoto Prime. the burning testament to Thalzer hubris. The nemesis had gone still again, drifting in solemn vigil over the battlefield. But the omnidirectional weapons platform, the combat core, remained active, its sensors sweeping the debris with glacial patience. Sirach, mind of hunger, forced himself to stand tall in the command chamber, though the deck still listed under emergency power. Hull fractures webbed the observation viewport. Half his neural relays flickered with static from power surges. The rest of his fleet was crippled or destroyed, and the survivors were fighting to stabilize orbit before the planet's gravity claimed them. On the main display, the combat core's sensor clusters rotated in eerie unison, tracking the limping Thalzer ships. It made no further attack, as if offering them a single chance to retreat. Some of his sub-commanders were already screaming through the synaptic channels to disengage, to run for the edge of the system and never look back. But Sirach had not clawed his way to dominion by yielding to fear. He clamped down on the cacophony, forcing calm through every mind tethered to him. "Attend," he rasped, voice cracked and metallic. "This is not the end." "Lord," came a frail whisper from his adjutant, "we cannot match that firepower. We must withdraw and summon the full Thalza armada, and leave this relic to rebuild." "No," his gaze locked on the nemesis's dark hull, and something colder than hatred took root. They had underestimated the humans' cunning, their ability to seed traps centuries deep. But if the Thalzer were anything, they were adaptive. Relentless, he sent a tight beam command to the surviving infiltration teams on Kyoto Prime. "Commence Phase Omega." On the planet below, Thalzer harvesters powered up, unfurling kilometer-long tendrils. Buried nanite reservoirs awoke in the soil, spreading liquid metallic contagion. If the nemesis was keyed to defend the colony's infrastructure, it would be forced to split its attention. Sirach switched to a secure neural channel. "Signal the Dark Spire. Authorize deployment of the parallax device." Even through the static, he heard the stunned intake of breath. The parallax device was a myth, a weapon designed only for use against Class Omega civilizations that could not be conquered by conventional means. "Lord, you would deploy such a thing? It will annihilate the biosphere." "That is acceptable," he hissed. "Better ashes than a second Earth." The adjutant fell silent, and Sirach felt the command acknowledged. Below, the infiltration teams advanced on the nemesis's surface. They carried with them parasitic breacher pods, tiny writhing engines of corrosion and viral code. As they reached the hull, they embedded the pods into seams between armor plates. The pods fused themselves to the alloy, injecting their corrosion threads deep into the ship's lattice. Almost immediately, localized energy surges began to flare. Sections of the nemesis's hull shimmered, fighting to repel the incursion. But for the first time, Sirach saw something that could pass for strain. The infiltration teams transmitted a steady stream of telemetry, showing minute fractures where the pods worked. Data channels shrieked with corrupted packets. The nemesis was fighting back, but the Thalzer had spent centuries refining these weapons. A bitter flicker of triumph warmed his mind. Humanity's ghost had bared its fangs, but even ghosts could be exorcised. Then, without warning, the combat core shifted course. It moved away from the scattered fleet, away from the flagship. Instead, it descended toward the planet in a smooth, unstoppable glide, zeroing in on the harvesters and the infiltration teams. Sirach's breath rasped. "They have recognized the true threat," he realized aloud. "Lord," came the adjutant again. "The parallax device is en route. Estimated arrival, 12 minutes. Hold position. If the core destroys our surface assets, we will still cleanse this world." The nemesis did not fire immediately. Instead, the combat core began to emit a new energy signature, resonant and piercing. Every Thalzer on Kyoto Prime collapsed in unison, their cilia writhing. Brainwaves spiked into Lethal seizures. The combat core was singing. It was a harmonic attack, a psionic frequency tuned to disrupt Thalza consciousness itself. Even aboard the flagship, Sirik felt his mind reel under the pressure. He fell to one knee, pressing his claws against the cold deck. All across the surface, the infiltration squads fell silent. Their breacher pods glowed red-hot, then burst into molten slag. The harvester shut down, tendrils switching feebly. Sirik clamped his cilia tight against his skull, fighting to remain conscious. Through the agony, he realized this was no simple defense protocol. This was vengeance. The Nemesis had not forgotten what the Thalzer had done to other worlds. It had learned them, their tactics, their weaknesses. And in learning them, it had become their nightmare. Gradually, the psionic assault faded. Sirik pulled himself upright. Around him, crew members twitched and groaned, their minds scorched but alive. "Report," he croaked. "Lord. All surface teams eliminated. The Nemesis has neutralized the infiltration. Status of the parallax device, 6 minutes." On the display, the combat core began to rise again, gliding back toward its station above Kyoto Prime. The message was unmistakable. "We see every move you make." Sirik's vision blurred, but he forced his mind to clarity. They were desperate, but the parallax device was nearly here. One last weapon to end this cursed world forever. And still, some part of him wondered if even annihilation would be enough. The parallax device emerged from fold space in a blossom of violet lightning. For a heartbeat, it hung in the void like an obscene star, a sphere of glassy latticework the size of a city, bound in rings of stabilizing singularities. Its purpose was simple: end all life, forever. Sirik, mind of hunger, felt a shudder of triumph as the flagship sensors confirmed the device's integrity. No defense existed in the known galaxy that could survive it. Entire planetary ecosystems had withered to sterilized rock under its harvest. Even the Nemesis could not withstand the total entropy cascade. "All ships, fall back to minimum safe distance," he ordered. His voice no longer trembled. "Device activation in 4 minutes." One by one, the shattered remnants of the Thalzer fleet began to pull away, engines flaring. Some ships limped on half their thrusters, hulls venting plumes of gas and molten debris, but all obeyed. Even in their terror, they believed. On Kyoto Prime, the last flickers of human power grids were going dark. Across the equatorial cities, ancient towers had collapsed under orbital bombardment. What few signals the Nemesis still received were garbled, hopeless distress calls. Humanity had come back to life only to die again, and then a signal pulsed out from the Nemesis itself that it was not a scream of defiance. It was not a plea for mercy. It was something far more unsettling, a calm, measured sequence of tones. A challenge. Sirik felt a chill that had nothing to do with vacuum. "Translate." His adjutant's voice was hollow. "Seoul Standard Dialect." Repeating. "Authentication. Code Omega Prime. Initiate final recall protocol." Transmitting coordinates. "Recall protocol. Recall of what?" The adjutant looked up, her cilia quivering. "Lord, the signal is not directed at us." As if in answer, the darkness beyond Kyoto Prime began to shift. Faint distortions blossomed in the interplanetary medium. Gravity lensed starlight into trembling arcs. Dozens of points rippled into existence, vast and cold and hungry. Sirik knew every warship in the galaxy by silhouette, but these were not in any record. They resembled nothing so much as fragments of a great fleet, each the size of continents, shaped in the brutal lines of ancient Terran engineering. Super dreadnoughts, hulks, fortress ships. They crawled out of hidden vaults in the Oort cloud and the far Lagrange points, emerging from centuries of dormancy, as if roused by a single thought. On the flagship bridge, no one dared to speak. The Nemesis had not come alone. It had called home the entire surviving arsenal of the last Earth War. One by one, the ships answered with beacon flares. Each signal was unique, but the translation was clear enough. Confirmed. Omega Prime Protocol acknowledged. Final deployment. Initiated. Sirik felt the reality collapsing around him. He had believed the parallax device would be the end, that no living thing could face such power. But here was proof that the humans had planned for this scenario, that in their final years they had anticipated a war that might outlast even their own extinction. "Lord," whispered the adjutant, "the new vessels are acquiring targeting locks on the parallax device." Of course, humanity would never allow a weapon of mass extinction to be used uncontested. No matter how many centuries had passed, the machine minds still clung to the old oaths: protect Earth's seed colonies, avenge them if they fall. On the display, the fortress ships began to unfold. Artillery spires telescoped out like the bones of titanic beasts. Graviton projectors cycled to lethal. "Charge!" Sirac's breath came ragged. "Raise all shields! Intercept trajectories!" But even as he spoke, he knew it was too late. The first salvo erupted from the nearest fortress ship, a barrage of accelerated singularity shells, each a micro-black hole encased in stabilizing fields. The shot struck the parallax device. In perfect synchrony, the lattisphere convulsed in a silent shockwave of collapsing gravity. Rings tore free, spinning away in trails of debris. A heartbeat later, the containment failed entirely. The singularity at its core swallowed the structure in a burst of violet entropy, then evaporated in a gravitational shriek that battered every ship for 1,000,000 kilometers. Sirac's flagship spun end over end, its inertial dampers screaming under the strain. His crew were flung against bulkheads and ceilings. Consoles erupted in blue fire. For long seconds, he thought the ship would simply rip apart. When the chaos ebbed, he forced his ruined body to stand. Through the fractured viewport, he saw the parallax device was simply gone, no more than a cloud of atomized wreckage. The Nemesis's signal repeated one last time: calm, implacable. Leave, or be ended. The Fal Zar fleet drifted in stunned silence. Every captain, every strategist, every conquering predator shared the same realization. They had triggered a war they could never win, because this was humanity unbound, not a species, but a legacy encoded in machine and iron will, determined that no empire would ever erase its memory. Sirac swallowed the acid taste of defeat. He had one choice left, and they all knew it. "Recall all remaining forces," he said, voice ragged. "We retreat." And across the bridge, no one spoke against him. The retreat never had a chance to become orderly. The Nemesis and its fortress kin did not wait for the Thalzer to slink away. Even as Sirac, mind of hunger, issued the recall order, the human war machines advanced, not with the arrogance of conquerors, but the pitiless momentum of a closing fist. Gravity wells began to bloom in precise formations around Kyoto Prime. Ships the size of mountain ranges maneuvered into a cordon, blocking every vector of escape. The Thalzer dreadnoughts scrambled to align jump drives, but graviton interference snarled their targeting systems. Engines flared and guttered. Panic flickered through the synaptic channels like wildfire. Sirac gripped the shattered edge of his command dais, refusing to let despair blind him. "Full dispersal," he commanded. "Scatter by any means. Some of us must survive to carry warning." But even he knew the odds were gone. On the main display, the Nemesis rotated with quiet finality. Its weapons hatches reopened, each one crackling with white corona discharges. Flanking fortress ships powered up their siege beams, columns of cyclopean energy capable of splitting moons. The first human salvo struck without preamble. A Thalzer cruiser detonated in a blossom of blue plasma as Singularity lances chord its drive reactor. Another ship tried to roll away, but a cutting beam sheared its dorsal hull into two drifting halves. No triumphant comes. No hails of surrender. Just mechanical precision. One target eliminated after another. Sirac's neural feeds filled with the death screams of his captains. Each was a psychic knife across his mind. For centuries, he had believed his people unstoppable, the natural apex of intelligent life. He had never imagined an enemy that killed without rage, only purpose. The flagship quaked as a nearby dreadnought erupted. A debris fragment, 100 meters of composite armor, slammed across the viewport in a spray of molten shrapnel. Alarms shrieked in every register. Shield collapse imminent, reported the adjutant in a whisper. Charge the jump core, Sirac rasped. Gravity distortion prevents stabilization. He looked up at the nemesis on the display. Even now, it did not hasten to destroy them. It was studying them, recording every maneuver, ensuring no mistake would leave a survivor. For an instant, he envied its simplicity. Humanity had died, but its final testament was pure and singular. You will never again prey on our kind. The fortress ships began a new pattern of fire, coordinated suppressive volleys that pinned the Thalzer fleet in a cage of annihilation. Every time a dreadnought tried to accelerate, kinetic rods smashed through its hull. When a smaller craft twisted away, proximity mines unfolded from hidden caches, exploding in silent brilliance. It was an execution, and it was not finished. Sirac felt the next weapon before he saw it, a surge of gravity so dense it pressed his cilia flat. The nemesis had activated its core projector, a sphere of negative mass condensed in front of the prow, shimmering like an obsidian sun. Impact in 20 seconds, the adjutant whispered, voice resigned. Sirac did not reply. He watched the growing singularity and let himself feel the enormity of what they had done. In their arrogance, the Thalzer had provoked something that transcended vengeance. A species that had refused to be forgotten. A final transmission arrived from the nemesis. The words were as calm and clear as ever. For every lost city. For every stolen life. For Earth, the singularity expanded. He tried to speak, an apology, perhaps, or a curse, but the words never came. The negative mass sphere detonated in a compression wave beyond any simulation. The flagship's hull collapsed like a shell of paper. Decks imploded, bulkheads folding in upon themselves. Sirac had time for a single, searing instant of nothingness before all sensation vanished across the battle space. Thalzer ships winked out of existence, crushed to monomolecular debris. Where once a conquering fleet had darkened Kyoto Prime's sky, now there was only a drifting haze of incandescent particles. The nemesis and its sisters ceased fire. Slowly, their weapons dimmed. Their hulls settled into quiet vigilance once more. On the planet below, human survivors, a scattering of hidden colonies and deep bunkers, emerged into a sky finally free of invaders. They did not cheer. Instead, they watched in awe as the fortress ships ascended into high orbit, forming a protective cordon that no living empire would challenge again. The last transmission from the nemesis echoed across every open channel, translated into every known language. We are the memory of Earth. We are the shield of humankind. Come no closer. In the centuries to follow, the story would spread across the stars. It would be spoken in hushed tones in Thalzer hatcheries, and whispered around the cold campfires of the Voronaks, and all who heard it would understand. Humanity had died once. It would never die again. Long after the last embers of the battle faded, the shattered remains of the Thalzer fleet drifted like a cautionary monument above Kyoto Prime. Their wreckage would orbit in silent testimony for millennia, a ring of failure and hubris that no empire could scrub away. On the scorched surface, dawn broke over the broken city spires. The survivors emerged slowly, as though afraid the nemesis's protective vigil might dissolve with the sunrise. But there it remained, colossal and unyielding, Flanked by the fortress ships it had called home. In a subterranean shelter once used as a research archive, an old woman named Aiko Watanabe climbed the rubble of a collapsed stairwell. She had lived through the first days of the invasion, when Thalzer harvesters darkened the sky and the planetary network fell silent. She had watched friends vanish in columns of violet light. She had believed the last story of Earth would end with her. Now, she stood blinking in the thin daylight, tears tracking down her ash-caked cheeks as she looked up at the armored leviathans hanging overhead. "We're not extinct," she whispered. Around her, other survivors stumbled into the ruins, engineers, farmers, children clutching hand-stitched dolls. For a long time no one spoke. They simply watched the ships. Some tried to wave. Others fell to their knees. One by one, relay beacons flickered to life across the settlements. Local transmitters began to chatter, first in cautious pulses and then in jubilant cries. From the mountain bunkers to the submerged arcologies, the same message echoed: "We are here. We survived." It did not matter that they were scattered and ragged. It did not matter that every major city had burned. What mattered was that humanity still drew breath, and the machines above were proof that the memory of Earth was never gone. Far beyond the planet, in a black-walled observation spire on Thalzer Prime, the survivors of Surak's High Command gathered in hushed horror. Hollow simulacra of the Nemesis's final onslaught played on every display. The singularity impact, the annihilation of the flagship, the instant where the Thalzer fleet ceased to exist. They watched it again and again, as if repetition could lessen the shame. "Impossible," murmured a strategist with silvered cilia. "This cannot be the same species we catalogued. This is not evolution. It is something else." An elder diplomat stared at the swirling projection, her gaze vacant. "It is legend. We have made legend into truth." Silence settled over the chamber. Each of them felt the same suffocating realization. The Thalzer could no longer claim the role of apex predator. The galaxy was larger than their hunger. Finally, the High Dominator spoke, her voice low and brittle. "Transmit a universal censure. All expeditions to Sol-descended worlds are forbidden. Any further aggression will be regarded as an existential threat to our people." And with those words, the Thalzer's dreams of total dominion died. Quiet, inglorious death. Back in orbit above Kyoto Prime, the Nemesis initiated a final transmission. Unlike its prior declarations of defiance, this message carried a different weight, a kind of solemn closure. "This world remains under our protection. Humanity endures. Any who trespass will be met with final reprisal." It repeated in every known language, no embellishment, no boasts, only fact. Below, Aiko listened to the broadcast from a scavenged ComSat. She closed her eyes, feeling a bloom of pride she hadn't known since childhood. The story her ancestors once told, that humanity was indomitable, that they were born of tenacity and iron purpose, had not been a myth. All around her, the survivors began to move again, finding tools among the ruins, starting to clear rubble, checking on the wounded. No one waited for instructions. They were the children of Earth, and Earth had taught them what to do when faced with annihilation: rebuild. Hours later, as the sun climbed higher, Aiko looked up one last time. The Nemesis drifted across the sky with the measured grace of a living world. Though its hull bore the scars of ancient wars, it remained vigilant, a colossus forged from human hands, carrying the memories of a species that refused to vanish. Somewhere, in the depths of its data vaults, she knew, were the names of every lost city, every extinguished life, every vow humanity had ever made, and she understood why the galaxy would never forget what had happened here. In the end, it was not because Earth's battleship had destroyed an entire fleet. It was because Earth's battleship had remembered. Because, in the cold dark between the stars, memory was more dangerous than any weapon. And so the legend spread. Wherever predators gathered to boast of conquest, someone would murmur of Kyoto Prime, of the day the galaxy screamed in terror, of the day humanity rose from extinction to remind all empires, we are still here.